friends. Welcome to this new episode of the Indian Military Anecdotes. This time we have with us veteran of the show, Colonel Satish Vaidya, the Para Commando. It's always very interesting to hear stories of the Para Commandos. And today he's probably going to narrate to us of some incident that happened when he was working with the Indian peacekeeping force and fighting the LTTE in Sri Lanka. Welcome, Colonel Satish Vaidya. Pleasure to have you on the show. So,
thank you, Anil.
What are you going to narrate to us today?
Okay. It's always a pleasure to be with you, share my experience and anecdotes.
Thank you.
Today, I will share an experience of mine where we had the LTTE probably using the civilians as a shield. And how it went through. The topic is relevant today because of the Hamas and Israel conflict going on, and the use of human civilians as a human shield.
Right.
Now, to begin with, I'll give you a brief background about how we operate, how soldiers operate in a counter-insurgency or militancy affected area, which is not a total war.
Right.
Soldiers, wherever we are, we follow the rules of the engagement. We are all in a standard uniform. We can identify each other. And the militants, on the other hand, are in an irregular dress.
Correct.
They could also be in civil dress at times where they want to mingle with the population so that they are not identified and that to avoid action against them.
Right.
Now, soldiers also follow the Geneva Conventions, which is a subject that is always drilled into us on ethical treatment of the enemy. If we capture a wounded enemy, then we're supposed to give him medical treatment.
Yes, absolutely.
If they surrender and they show a white flag, we're supposed to take their surrender and not shoot them. And the list goes on. Now, we are also trained to use our weapons effectively. Now, carrying a lethal weapon is a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
We have to use it correctly.
Absolutely.
And we have to avoid shooting civilians or harming them in any way. So, to the extent, I would say that elite troops who go in for very close, sensitive missions like hostage rescue, they practice their firing on hostage rescue targets, which have a hostage in front. The militant is hiding behind the hostage and pointing a gun at him. So
it's a difficult situation.
The responsibility of not hitting the hostage, but to hit the militant is a big burden.
Yeah, and very challenging, very challenging.
Yes. And soldiers go into such missions with a big responsibility and with a lot of restrictions. One more aspect is as the range of the weapon, effective range of the weapon is shorter and shorter. Like a sniper rifle is effective at 800 meters, probably you can get a headshot because it's used in that particular way.
Right.
But when you come to a rifle and come to a carbine and a pistol, they are much less accurate at the range at which the enemy is engaged. So one has to be that much more careful. And a weapon which fires in the burst mode, automatic, it has an inherent dispersion which cannot be controlled.
Correct.
It's very difficult unless it's a bracket mounted heavy machine gun which will shoot up to 1500 meters or so. So weapons have a restriction.
Yeah.
Then there is a stress. The soldiers have a stress on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Like they have to keep a track of where our own colleagues are in respect to the enemy, because everybody is moving forward in a fire and move manner.
Yeah.
So somebody is moving forward, somebody is firing, then they fire, and then we move, and so on.
Right.
Now, whenever there is from a lull, when you're going through a peaceful time and suddenly somebody opens fire,
Yeah.
the immediate response is to dash down, crawl, observe where the fire came from, and to reply.
Correct.
Now, all this can be possible in a open field where there are no people. But if there are civilians there, then to observe and to find a militant among the civilians who would
Yeah.
be probably dressed in civil dress
Correct.
is that much more difficult.
Absolutely.
So these are the restrictions that we go through, and the probability of more civilians in an area is much higher now with the population densities everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
40, 50 years ago, the population densities were much
Wasn't so
less,
much.
areas
Yeah.
were much
Yeah.
more
True.
open. There was one incident where the militants opened fire at a post from the west in the evening when the
Oh,
sun was shining into the post, into the defenders' eyes,
right.
like
Right.
into the
So,
soldiers' eyes.
right.
And they could
So
not
the light
see
from west has a kind of a blinding effect on you.
exactly. The
Right.
sun was shining into their eyes and they
Right.
could not see the target. So,
Right.
such militants use such tactics also. Now, I'll come to my experience where we had to carry out a population record of a place called Velanai.
Okay.
Now, all the civilians in that area, entire area, it was a semi-urban, semi-rural area. Not
Right.
urban actually, it was a
Semi-rural.
spread out rural area
Mhm.
with houses like spread out among fields all over the place.
Mhm.
Now, the civilians were told that anybody who's found in their house or on the road or anywhere else other than a temple ground where we were to carry out these records.
You had asked them to assemble there.
Yes, they were asked to assemble there, and anyone who was found outside the temple, that ground, would be considered to be an LTTE militant and taken appropriate action against. Now, on this ground, now we had about 4 to 5,000 people, all civilians, spread out and sitting on the ground quite peacefully
4 to
in the hot
5,000.
sun.
You said 4 to 5,000 people.
Yes, the whole
Wow.
ground was full.
Oh, that's a very huge crowd.
It was a huge crowd, and there was not a place on the ground which was so-called vacant. It was all full.
Right.
Now we were sitting there. We kept our weapons on the side on the wall, and we were acting like clerks or doing the duty of a clerk and
Yeah, correct.
writing down all their names, their
Names and other
age,
details. Yeah.
relationship, which family, what address, and all that. And it was a monotonous job. Now before I proceed, like I'll tell you a small example here that uh, almost amounting to earning goodwill from the civilians,
Right.
from the locals. There was a young mother, she must have been barely 20 years old,
Oh,
with a baby which must have been barely a month old,
I see.
sitting in the shade uh, quite close to us. Now, as the day progressed, the sun and the shadow shifted, and I could see that this young girl was very uncomfortable, and she was trying to shift her baby into the shade because it was getting hot.
Right.
I noticed that, and I told her to get up from there and sit in a place which had better shade. And then I got back to my work. Now, before I could get back to my work, I found that both her parents were with her, dignified looking people. So they had a quick word amongst each other, and the father came to me and point blank asked me, "Are you a Brahmin?"
Acha.
Now, I had never given this aspect any thought because I always considered I was
Absolutely.
a soldier.
I mean, yeah, we as Faujis don't ever think on these lines at all.
Yeah, exactly. So this I feel that this small action of mine would have earned me a little bit of goodwill.
Goodwill, absolutely.
And if I get a little goodwill, the IPKF and the Indian Army gets goodwill. It's
Absolutely.
related.
Absolutely.
So the militants don't want the armed forces to get goodwill.
Goodwill from the civilian.
And as the day progressed, it turned into afternoon, and we had had our lunch, and the work was monotonous. We were still grinding on with writing and asking and calling and all that. So
Right.
trying to segregate those who had already given the records and keeping them away after they'd done their job. Now, in the afternoon, when it was very monotonous, uh, there was a loud bang from the road. It must have been about 200-300 meters away from us,
I
or
see.
outside the ground,
I see.
and it sounded like a gunshot.
Mhm.
As a soldier who was conditioned into that operational environment,
Yeah.
our immediate reaction was to drop our paper and pens, pick up our weapons, and
At the
rush
weapons, yeah.
outwards. Now, I'm sure that the LTTE had done this as a deliberate measure
Mm.
to cause us to open unprovoked firing,
Right, right.
and the whole ground full of civilians, there would have been a bloodbath,
Yeah.
nothing less than that, because there were 15, 20 of us with AK-47s,
Mm.
and the firing that would have happened would have been bad in the crowd.
Absolutely.
But fortunately for me, all my troops are very, I call them battle hardened. I would say that all my men were totally tuned into controlling their fire. And
They were
one of
sensitized.
us
They were
fired
very
a
well
single shot,
sensitized towards the situation.
sensitized, and uh, I would say their fire control was so good that until you identify a target, until you
You will
identify
not
a threat,
fire.
you don't just open up.
Yeah, yeah.
That happens to a person or a soldier who is not conditioned to the battle.
Yeah, yeah. True, true.
So the fact that no one opened fire, and I would add one thing here, but if one person opens fire, it is infectious.
Correct.
The other
It's
person
infectious.
thinks he has seen something and opened fired at it. So
Yes,
I also must fire at something.
yes.
So it results in a chain reaction where
Right,
everyone
right,
then
right.
opens up,
Right, right,
and then it's difficult to stop.
right.
Once with the sound of all the guns going off, or rifles
Mhm.
going off, nobody's going to hear you ordering them to stop firing.
True, true.
So this experience only reinforces one conviction in my mind, that the militants, or in other words, terrorists, because they're also terrorizing the local population not
Correct,
to interact with us and not to give us information, even if they don't support them.
correct.
And in doing this, they are acting as cowards because they are hiding behind civilians. They're deliberately causing casualties of their own population by triggering an unprovoked firing from the armed forces. So classify them as militants or terrorists or cowards.
This is very interesting, and this is typically probably what is happening in the Gaza area today. The militants or terrorists or cowards, like you mentioned, are using the civilians as shield to fight against the regular army. This is the tactic we have seen some of these guys, terrorists, using in Jammu Kashmir. I think it is really hats off to the great training of the Indian soldiers, Indian officers, how they control their mind, and they are sensitized, they understand the situation, not to opened indiscriminate fire against the civilians against a very severe provocation created by the militants. And you, as para commandos, are probably far well trained than a normal soldier. So, and you would have faced many such situations during your service time. So, this was very interesting, Satish. And thank you very much for coming on our show and narrating this interesting piece. And we look forward to having many more stories from you in the days to come. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And all the very best, Satish. Thank you.